Another point that you mentioned with these dating apps, right? How it's changing. For example, like men, what kind of relationship they're looking for, and like for yourself, for example, like how younger men sometimes also like older women, which is fine, right? And there was an interesting point and like a study that you mentioned where regarding menopause and how right in the past evolutionary women had menopause because at an older age they were considered a less desirable mate, so this process in their body kicked in and kind of left them without their fertility or to reproduce. But apparently uh, now that older women are more desired, that might push evolutionary for their menopause to be delayed, like the onset of it. I don't know if I understood that
I think
correctly.
it's the demographic, like since we're able to match with different demographics now on the dating apps,
Yeah.
right? That more young men are being, matched with older women, and because of that, it could be pushing menopause forward,
Yeah. Could
right?
that be the case? Yeah, I was interested in that.
Yeah, no, it's a sort of an older study, but done by some folks at McMaster, and I mean we've got a lot of bio data on humans and how we are shaped by our environment and how our bodies respond, over enough conditioning over time, and there is a huge sort of shift with different kinds of pairings with younger men and older women. And a lot of times these women have already had children, if they did have children in their lives, and are not necessarily interested in having kids. And sort of that millennial shift that I speak about in the book, whereby a lot of young men are not really primarily interested in becoming fathers. If these particular pairings go forward over significant amounts of time, it is possible for menopause and women's bodily markers of fertility to shift. Yeah. So, that would be over a long period of time of prolonged sort of contact with these very specific pairings, but it could happen.
Yeah, that's a really interesting study. And I'm guessing, like, the further we advance with technology, AI, and all these ways that we're meeting new people, then, that might impact the fertility and the menopause as well, right?
That's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shows how the environment does definitely shape our evolution and biology as
Yeah.
well. We think
Yeah.
some things are set in stone, but they
And
can
if
change.
people continue to, there are certain countries where, sex robots and sex dolls are incredibly popular. They're very expensive,
Yeah.
by the way. So it's a very class oriented kind of purchasing system. But, over time, that could also impact, where and how we distribute our genetic DNA, right? And if we do.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on those AI sex bots and all that? Like, I don't know, it just seems like it's getting out of hand to me.
For, I think there are certain groups of people for whom interacting with a real person is very hard for whatever reason,
Mm.
whether it's disability, whether it's pre existing trauma. In those cases, I completely understand that. And it's important to explore, they shouldn't have barriers to exploring pleasure and sexuality. So I think in some ways that these dolls can be very, very helpful and effective. I think that they can also be used to feed certain kinds of violent behaviors and things like that could bleed over and impact real people in romantic and intimate situations as well. So it's a fascinating area of study, and consumerism and social change, and be interesting to see what happens going forward.
I don't know, because yeah, we've had a few guests talk about, the importance of connection, and you talk about this as well. So that's why I
Yeah.
was like, in my opinion, like sex bots, I'm not sure like they're the best thing for a lot of people, and I think you probably agree the same. But, I think primarily we should focus on having like a connection with someone.
With a
Just
human.
yeah, like with a human, because having a connection at the end of the day is what's going to make you healthier. It's going to make you happier. And I don't know if you get the same impact from a robot necessarily, but I get your point that,
It needs to
maybe
be
for a
explored more.
certain, yeah, like a certain demographic of people, maybe there could be some potential. Yeah.
Yeah, there's also ways to engage in, relatively harmless play with a doll and a couple or a group party. Like there's lots of different ways that dolls can be used that are not necessarily like dysfunctional or, pathological, right? So I think we
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
be a bit more creative in terms of how we're thinking, right? But
Yeah, I had someone joke around with me the other day. He's like, "Oh, you're in a relationship, right? You should get an AI sex doll and experiment." I was like, "Huh?" A weird
Really?
comment.
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, like it's
Yeah,
not my cup of tea
Right.
for sure, but I'm not gonna
yeah, that's the thing.
no
Yeah,
shade for people who are using it in inventive and creative ways to enhance their pleasurable experiences.